Great exciting time of year. One of my favorite parts of it is we also get to start on budget planning season. So a lot of companies are starting those conversations, laying out the processes, and that's why we're going to talk to you today about, we're going to talk about at a high level about the budgeting process, purpose, the inputs into that process, and then how to assess tools, especially automation tools, to maximize your budget. We're going to talk about how to identify those automation opportunities, how to conduct an ROI analysis, and how to get that proposal over the finish line and get to yes. And then, of course, at the end, as always, we'll wrap up with some Q&A. So, like I said, one of my favorite topics, I'm one of those geeks who actually enjoys the budgeting process. If I hadn't gone the technology route, I probably would have ended up going the finance route. One of the things I learned, Jason, from a very wise CFO years ago is that all budgets are wrong, right? It's just a matter of how wrong they are and how close we can get. And so got just some high-level advice and suggestions here on better understanding the purpose and the process and trying to get to that budget planning, that budget that will make the CFO happy. So one of the things I do is I always start with detailing and analyzing the prior year, and especially what were the variances from the prior year, what can we learn from that, and how do we carry that forward into planning for the next year. But then there are so many other really great inputs that I think a lot of times leaders overlook. And if you evaluate all of those appropriate inputs, it can really take a lot of the guesswork out of the process. We're going to talk more as we go on about demonstrating the ROI for those major investments. And one thing that really makes the CFOs happy is when you're not just budgeting for spending, but you're actually budgeting for savings, for cost savings and efficiency improvements. So that's a key to making them happy. A lot of people are familiar with the run, grow, and transform breakdown. That's something I've found useful, is to take your budget and categorize it into those run, grow, and transform categories. And then I'm a big fan of industry benchmarking, but I'll tell you, I've worked for CFOs who love it and are really interested to know. And then I've also worked with CFOs who have no interest and are not as impressed by industry benchmarking. So I think one of the keys here is to kind of understand your CFO and what is going to make them happy and what's not. For some, these breakdowns and the benchmarking and comparisons are going to be valuable, and others, it's not so much. And then our last tip, actually, this was one that we talked about, and you can add a little bit of color to, but focusing on the cornerstones of your tech stack and that's really going to give you that foundation. You want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is one that my own team struggled with when I came on board at Automox 3 years ago. Is they just tried to treat everything as equally important, and had a lot of trouble coming up with a budget to cover all their needs. And I pointed out to them, I said, look, like, you have certain immovable objects on the IT and the security side. For security, it's like, you're going to have an EDR, you're going to have a SIEM. On the IT side, you're going to have endpoint management, you're going to have a ticketing system, you're going to have this and this. So, focus on laying out those cornerstones first of the must-haves, and then think about all the enabling things that you're going to add in afterwards and prioritize and stack rank those. But, you're really essentially making two separate arguments to your CFO about, this is the stuff that really cannot move. They must have. Now we can consolidate there. We can, break things out, but you can't treat your platforms and your point solutions on an equal basis.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. So let's talk a little bit about those various inputs. So I already mentioned in the previous slide the focus of the analysis of the prior year spend. If I start out my budget presentation with that comparison analysis, and I explain to the CFO what the variances were, that helps them have confidence that we have a good understanding of where we're coming from, what we're moving to, how we're learning from those things and applying those learnings to the next year. Here in Minnesota, we have something called, it used to be called MEA, or Education Minnesota Week, and it's like a 3-day break for all the schools. And I would always spend that time. We'd go up to cabin up north, and I would spend that 3 days. That's when I would do this really deep dive analysis and evaluate those variances, because there's so much to learn from that. And frankly, I just loved it. I would geek out on that. Some people could say I need to get a better hobby, but that's a really great, it's always been a really great starting point for me. And then the next step, the next group of inputs that we layer in should really be about the strategic business objectives. So we don't provide technology for the sake of technology, and we don't budget for the sake of technology or of making things easier or more fun for us. It's all to serve the business objectives. So we have to, as CIOs, we have to have a good understanding of what is that strategy? What are those objectives? What are the new products, markets that we're going to be moving into, the new capabilities that the business wants to deliver? And what does the technology platform need in order to support those?